Hey, welcome to Just Salvos Live. Very exciting to be with you again this week. We're also very excited to have our guest, an amazing Australian. His name is Tony Nicholson, and he is the head of the Brotherhood of St Laurence. It's almost Anti-Poverty Week coming up in the middle of October, and so today, Mr Nicholson, we'd like to talk to you about poverty in an Australian context. First of all, welcome.
Thank you. Pleased to be with you.
Very pleased to have you here. So tell us, what does poverty look like in Australia today?
Well, I think we're at a really interesting stage in social history in Australia. Because if you think about it, we've, over the last almost 30 years, we've been through this extraordinary period of prosperity. Yeah. Most of us have done very, very well. But at the same time, large numbers of Australians have been left behind, really sort of marooned, relying upon welfare. So you have about 1.4 million Australians who who either don't have work or can't get enough work. So we've got almost 500,000 people unemployed for an average of about 32 weeks. We've got about another 800,000, and these are often not talked about. These are folk that can't get enough hours to satisfy their basic needs, so they're underemployed. And then we, at the Brotherhood of St Laurence, we estimate there's about 150,000 people on disability support pensions who could be working with a little bit of extra help and a bit more flexibility in the Australian workplace. So we've got this extraordinary situation. Most of Australians have done very well, but large numbers have been left behind, really not able to get a good foothold in the world of work. And if you think about it, in Australia, that's how the vast majority of us build a good life for ourselves and our family. It's through participation in the workforce, being able to have a job. So
why aren't these people participating? Is it that they're lazy? We've got a booming economy. We've got best treasurer in all of the world. We sailed through the financial crisis. What's the problem of these people?
Well, I think the big issue is that the Australian economy, you're right, it is a strong economy, it's a dynamic economy, but it's changed radically over the last 30 or 40 years. So it now places a real premium on education and skills and the networks that you have into the world of work. So if you missed out on getting a good education, if you don't have the skills that are in demand, if you don't have networks into the world of work where your family or friends are working, it's very, very hard to get into work. So if you think about it, if you go back about 30 years ago, if you left school at year 10 and you could reasonably expect to be able to get a decent job that would enable you to build a career, buy a house and raise a family. Now, if you left school at year 10 and you're of workforce age, you're 60% likely to be unemployed.
Wow.
So these are radical changes. And it's so hard for people to get a foothold in the world of work if they don't have any education and if they've been out of work for any length of time.
In terms of education, then, is it the education system's fault that people are leaving school? Is it individuals? Is it families? Is it pockets of communities? You know, why are people leaving school at 16 if that's so damaging for them?
Well, look, there are a range of things, and really we think the focus of our efforts as a nation to assist these people build a better life for themselves has to be about building their capabilities to be able to participate in the economy. So that starts right from when they're little ones, before they go to school. So some of the work that the Brotherhood of St Laurence is doing is helping families prepare their children for school. So disadvantaged families, understanding what's required for children to be able to thrive in school, and getting the disadvantaged parents who themselves often haven't had a very good experience at school, to get them feeling confident about encouraging their children, mentoring their children, and confident about dealing with school. So that starting at the very early stage of life, but also then the really important period of when children are growing up as teenagers, ensuring that they stay in some form of education and training is really critically important. Because if they don't get over that important transition, then their life chances are really curbed significantly.
And you say education and training, and that's an interesting point because it would seem, at the moment at least, there's a real pressure on young people to not only stay at school, but to stay at school in an academic pathway. Not many schools offer great guidance or advice on what to do if you're just not academically minded. So some guys or girls are getting to maybe year 10, really hesitant to push themselves and get to university. It's just not going to happen for them. Are we forgetting these people?
Oh, look, there is, you do have to have basic numeracy and literacy skills. But there are now good, things are changing in recent years. There are a lot of opportunities for young people to do different things and go in different pathways. People can go into the trades. There are various forms of school that don't require a person to sit in a classroom of 30 people, etc. So there are a lot of opportunities for young people, but they do need a lot of support and their family. What we found at the Brotherhood of St Laurence is it's critically important to have the parents engaged in their children's education because so often you can have a good school, you can have good curriculum, you could have good teachers, but if the parents aren't engaged in their education, the children become disconnected from school. Because after all, it's our parents that have the greatest influence over us in terms of how we think about life, how we think about our future. Yeah.
I mean, I think we would agree that the changes that need to be made aren't necessarily going to come from the welfare system itself, in terms of increasing pensions and so on. We want to really be able to prevent poverty as well as be able to just support people. Having said that, I guess the welfare system is, significant and important. How do we balance, our advocacy and our attention towards ensuring that welfare, that safety net system is adequate for people with, our pleading with the government and others to really support things like even the VCAL program or other education programs that keep people in training?
I think the problem we've had with our welfare safety net is that people get marooned on it. And in part that's due to the fact that we provide or we give too much focus to thinking about poverty simply as a lack of adequate income. So what we need to do is make sure our safety net actually becomes a trampoline.
Yep.
So you have to have a safety net for people, of course, but we also need to ensure that people are rapidly able to get the skills and opportunities to participate in the economy and to start to build a good life for themselves. And that's where we've got to do more. We have to have more investment in say, for example, for teenagers and adults in active labour market programs. When you compare with the OECD, the top 5 nations in the OECD, we only spend about a quarter on active labour market programs that they're spending.
Wow.
So we're really down the lower ladder in that aspect. But it's more than just spending more money. It's about how you spend it. And we do have the opportunity in Australia to actually engage employers a lot more in preparing disadvantaged people for work. Because with our ageing population, the really interesting thing is that the proportion of people of workforce age is in decline. So that means going forward, if our economy continues to go reasonably well, you will find labour market shortages of labour. Employers won't be able to find employers. So that provides us with an opportunity because it brings an economic imperative to be aligned with our moral imperative.
Which is really what we have needed for so long, for people who have power to actually start saying, well, this is in my best interest to help people. It's not
That's
just
right.
the good and moral thing to do.
Now, the encouraging thing is that some employers are starting to think that way. So, for example, at the Brotherhood, we're doing a lot of work with a number of major employers. One of those is the ANZ Bank. So the ANZ Bank is helping us to get unemployed refugees into work.
Oh, wow.
Because unemployed refugees, 40% of refugees are unemployed 4 years after settlement. This is extraordinary high levels of unemployment, almost like in our Indigenous community. So what the bank is doing is actually enabling us to offer to those people 10 weeks paid work experience So we work with those unemployed refugees, prepare them for them. The bank takes them into the bank, gives them 10 weeks of paid work experience. Now the interesting thing is that 80% of those people go on and secure full-time work within the bank. And the bank's view is that this is good for the bank because they're getting good employees and it's demonstrating to the community the diversity of people that are employed in the bank and engaging in the broader community.
That's a really interesting thing, actually, because we often hear some media commentators or political commentators using that figure that many refugees are still unemployed within 4 years. They use that as a bullet point to say we should stop letting refugees into this country. They only bludge off our welfare anyway. What you're suggesting is that it's not that they're here to bludge for 4 years, they just can't get a foothold.
Yeah, and you know, they face multiple difficulties. You know, just becoming understanding the culture. Often they have skills that aren't recognised in Australia. Sometimes it's to do with language. Sometimes it's as basic issues of securing stable housing. But what so this opportunity that there is being driven by the demographics of our nation presents us is for employers to become much more engaged in helping people get into the world of work. It makes good economic sense for the employers. It makes really good social sense. So this is a model that we're now doing in small pilot programs across a whole range of disadvantaged people. So it's not just refugees, it's people that have been unemployed for 3 or 4 years. It's people that as adults have become redundant as the industry they worked in has changed and their skills have become redundant, etc.
It sounds quite hopeful. I feel like we could almost get to a point where we can start to see, particularly the pockets of disadvantage that we're seeing in our country, perhaps starting to move forward if we start to implement some of these
Well, the first thing is that we've got to recognise that the opportunity is there and it's just over the horizon. I think the other thing is for both policymakers and the general community to understand that it actually works. You can get long-term unemployed people into employment. They can thrive in the economy. And this is what we're demonstrating on the ground. Admittedly, it's in small numbers at the moment, but it demonstrates with the right mix of assistance, with the right sort of investment, people can come off long-term welfare recipients can successfully become employed.
Sorry, I know you want to finish, but when we focus on that capability then, when we focus on people's strengths as opposed to, oh, well, they've been long-term unemployed, they won't know, so on and so on, which I think we're, really trying, certainly through our conversation on our Facebook and website, we're trying to get really people to transition from well, they've always been poor, they'll always be poor. It's some sort of genetic defect in a particular community, as opposed to, well, let's focus on the capacity of individuals and communities.
And that's as much challenge for those of us who work in the community welfare sector as it is for employers in the broader community. Because sometimes I become a little frustrated with some of my colleagues in the sector who seem to have an attitude that, well, these folk really aren't up to it in the modern economy and what we have to do is create some sort of a national welfare shelter. Now, the important thing here is that that's not what the disadvantaged people want. I've worked for many, many years in the area of homelessness, and so I knew the stories of a lot of people who experience homelessness. And I can tell you, even in their depths of their despair, they didn't aspire to be part of an underclass. They shared normal aspirations that you and I have, to have a decent place to live, to have a job and have some sense of family. So the trick here is to tap into those aspirations of people and then to build on their strengths.
It sounds very exciting and inspiring. We could talk for the rest of the day. In fact, we have about 7 questions we didn't even get to. But it's been really challenging and interesting. Thanks so much, Tony Nicholson, for joining us. You can find out more about the Brotherhood of St Laurence on their website, which is on the screen right now. You can also find out more about Anti-Poverty Week, which is coming up very soon, by jumping on our Facebook, facebook.com/Just Salvos, or our website, justsalvos.com. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tony Nicholson, thank you, and we will see you again next week.